The entertainment item tonight is Golden Lake Gold Mine, uh, being presented by Geoff Winkler. Um, I didn't know where this was until I read the promo for it, but says the Golden Lake gold mine sat on a plateau high above the west bank of the Wodiellic Creek and Smythes Creek, a little north of Piggereet. Never heard of Piggereet. Yeah, they'll probably pass by it a few times. Anyway, that's up near the Ballarat area. Without further ado, would you please wave a hand for Geoff Winkler? Over to you, Geoff.
Right. Can you hear me okay?
Certainly can.
No worries. We'll get started. It's not all down to me. Michael's sitting next to me here, as you can see, Michael Menzies. So it was a joint effort to do all this research, or what we've done so far. There's still a little bit more to be done, but anyway, we'll get on with the presentation. And yeah, does that work? That should be right.
Oh, well done, Geoff.
Move this little preview screen.
Very nervous moment for us.
Okay, the Golden Lake Tramway. Now, the mine was one of a large number of shafts sunk to exploit the Smythes lead. The Golden Lake Deep Lead Mine was located approximately 16 miles to the southwest of Ballarat in central Western Victoria. You can see the red X there, obviously, down between Newtown and Linton, a little bit to the south of the Linton railway line. Now, the site, as mentioned in the promo, is situated on a high plateau and is surrounded on three sides by the deep valley of the watercourse known as Smythes Creek or the Wodielloc River, along with its tributaries. It lies a little to the south of the route of the later constructed railway line, which ultimately extended to as far as Skipton, between the stations of Newtown and Happy Valley. You can see here on this view, Nimmons Bridge, the infamous Nimmons Bridge on the current rail trail down to Skipton, is sitting in the little valley down here. You know, the course of the deep Smythes lead, which extends to the northeast from Piggereet, which is off to the lower left of the image, is marked by the mine sites of the Golden Horn Mine down here, the Golden Lake in the middle here, the Galatea, which was down in here, Golden Stream number 2 and the Golden Stream number 1 across here, and various others, and it ran right through up this line up into Mydale, up in the corner up here. So you can sort of see the route it followed through there. And the original valley in which this lead exists was filled with a basaltic lava flow from a volcanic vent near Scarsdale. The subsequent subsidence caused through the hot central mass of the magma continuing to flow, as that nearer to the edges cooled and solidified, resulted in the current valley roughly approximating that of the original. Give or take a little bit of swaying backwards and forwards there, but this current valley follows the original lead. The extant mulliqueeps are still extensive and radiating to the north and the south of the shaft. The shaft was indicated with this little blue circle is here. In the eastern quadrant, this area in here, which it is presumed principally contained the basalt from the main vertical shaft, has virtually completely removed and was used mainly by the Victorian Railways, who constructed a siding into there from the northwest. It came down across through here and through this gap here and took the all the fill from this area here. Now I'll pass on to Michael, and he can give a little bit of a rundown on the mine itself.
Okay, well, to one extent we know a fair bit about it, and to another we don't know a lot. I first started poking around this area probably 20, 30 years ago, mainly visiting Pigaroot. And about a decade ago, one of the tours I ran to follow closed rail lines, coach tour, we followed the line from Ballarat to Linton. And a year later, we went back to do Linton to Skipson to coincide with the centenary of it opening. And on both those occasions, we visited the site of the Golden Lake, because that's where the ballast siding had been built off the railway line. On the second occasion, we poked around quite a bit on the reconnaissance for the trip and found basically you could hardly see the alignment of the tramway once it got away from the railway, but you could sort of feel it under your feet. And during this period, I also got to know one of the local historians, a lovely lady who sadly passed away from cancer a couple of years ago. And she imparted quite a bit of knowledge to me because she'd studied that, particularly that area at Pigaroot and Springdulla, and had written a thesis about it. And there's a funny little group of people that gather every March at the Happy Valley School, and it's the Happy Valley Old Scholars Association, and they have an annual reunion. So I got roped into going along to that by Joan, and then roped into giving a talk about the history of the Skipton Railway, and about a year later on the survey for the railway that was never built from Newtown down to Cape Clear and Pitfield. So I've spent quite a bit of time around the area and got to know a few of the locals. But Joan hadn't really researched the history of the Golden Lake mine. She was concentrating on Springdulla and Pigaroot, and nobody else seems to know much about it. There was a book, A History of Pigaroot and Golden Lake, published back in the 1920s and reprinted in the 70s. And there's a paragraph there. I'll just read a bit of it to you. In the middle of the township, the lake mine was situated. It was at first in 1863 known as the Zyda Z Company. £1,000 was spent in boring its area to locate the lead. The shaft was sunk near the deepest bore, 300 feet deep. 3 layers of rock were gone through. Gravel contained traces of gold was found between the two, showing, as in Ballarat, that sufficient time had elapsed between the flows for the drainage from the hills to deposit some of its burden. Owing to the thickness of the basalt and the great quantity of water, 3 years were occupied in sinking the shaft 300 feet. Large engine boilers were bought from Melbourne in sections owing to the difficulties of transport. 2 pumps were required. Eventually, the capital called up was £14,000 and £50,000 was returned in dividends. The average number of miners employed was 130. A tram line to the ranges brought in the fuel and timber. So that was the only evidence we knew about there being a tramway. And the company built a boarding house, which afterwards became the first state school. By around about 1873, mining had ceased right through the area. It was always difficult because there was far too much water inflow, and they were constantly battling to keep the water level down. And when one of the mines shut, the others couldn't keep ahead of the water. So eventually they paid the company to keep its pumps running. And they had a dispute with that company about how much to pay for the pumping. They refused to pay what the company asked, then found their mines completely flooded, so they had to pay about double what they were first asked. So it was a foolish bargain in the first place. So that's a brief nutshell of the mining there in the area. There's not a lot known about the company. We know that a new company was formed in 1873 to take over from the Zyda Z Company, and it was originally incorporated as a limited company, but that didn't last very long, and then they altered the company registration to be registered under the under the mines regulations. So instead of being the Golden Lake Mining Company in brackets limited, it became the Golden Lake Mining Company in brackets registered. Most of the shareholders initial shareholders had their residential addresses at Scarsdale. There was, I think, one at Buninyong, one at Ballarat, one in Geelong, and one gave his residential address as New Zealand. And they used to have half-yearly meetings at the Scarsdale pub. Most of those reports are in the most of those meetings were reported in either the Star or the Ballarat Courier paper, but not much happened. And by the time you get to 1873, they're reporting that that the mining operations are starting to get into poor ground, poor quality material. They're not really getting much, and it's in different quality. They tried to sell off some other machinery. They allowed some tributers to go into part of the mine. By October 1874, the number of hands employed below was reduced to 12 facemen in each shift. No further development of new ground is likely to be made in the mine. The high roofs are all likely places for wash, having been hitherto fully explored. 3 of the horses are being drawn from the underground, 3 being left below is sufficient for present requirements, and your directors, having in view an early termination of operation and judiciously disposal to effect the entire liquidation of the amount due to the bank as soon as possible. And shortly afterwards, it appears they ground to a halt. There were no further reports regarding the half-yearly meetings. And there was a sale of the mine equipment and plant in July 1875, and it doesn't help us much either. It tells us that there were 2 horizontal steam engines, 20.5-inch and 16-inch cylinders, with pumping and winding gear complete, 3 steam boilers, 26 foot by 6 foot 6, 350 feet of 12-inch pumps, plungers and draw lifts, 1 9-inch double action surface pump, 4 puddling machines, 2 12-inch belts, 50 trucks, kick-ups and cages, 2 wire ropes, 480 feet each, 12 tons of rail, and a variety of articles and materials suitable for mining purposes. And that advertisement was placed by G. Pender, the manager, and he was the manager for the 12 years of the mine's life. So that's about all we know, and I'll hand you back to Geoff to fill you in on what we found when we started to look, following that reference about the tram line to bring in the firewood, what we've found, trying to find it and trying to find more about it.
Okay, just a note on that sale. Even though rails and trucks were mentioned, we assume that was from within the mine, not from the timber tramway up on the surface. There's nothing to indicate anything came from there. So that question mark still remains over that. Anyhow, our investigation of the Golden Lake Tramway came about following a sideways detour from some research being undertaken relating to the construction of the railway line between Biak and Newtown. And featuring heavily in that railway research was the procurement of gravel for ballast from a large mullocky further along the Smythe Lead at the Butte Company's No. 2 mine, situated up in here, on Mr. John Bird's property at Scarsdale, and the siding that the Victorian Railways had laid into that, which is this little red curved line up into here. That's the photo of that Butte mine. That's the closest thing we've got to the Golden Lake. We haven't been able to uncover any photographs whatsoever of the Golden Lake mine in its heydays. Anyway, subsequently, further research discovered that during the construction of the Linton to Skipton line, shortly afterwards, the use of the Scarsdale mullock for ballast was rejected in favour of that from the Golden Lake mine. They basically exhausted the good supply in this quarry up here in the mullock, and found a much better and closer supply at the Golden Lake. So our interest was piqued and discussions took place, and a field excursion resulted. And this was principally for the inspection of any remnant VR infrastructure in that general area. Out of left field, a remark was made that while we were there, we could keep our eyes out for a surface tramway from the mine west to the ranges that was used to bring in boiler wood and mining timber. Now, this was news to the rest of us and instigated our research into the Golden Lake Tramway. And sadly, that comment was about the sum total of the knowledge of Peter Evans, who had made it. Now, just prior to this time, my brother had made me aware that raw LiDAR data for parts of the state were now procurable online, and that he had the software to be able to process it. LiDAR, which is an acronym for Light Detection and Ranging, uses laser light to measure distance and make highly accurate 3D maps and models. The LiDAR works on the same principles as radar and sonar, the difference being that while the radar uses microwaves and sonar uses sound waves, LiDAR uses reflected light, which can measure distance faster, with greater precision and higher resolution than either radar or sonar. Complex algorithms are utilised in the preparation of the raw data, which enable vegetation, trees and buildings, etc., to be identified and eliminated from the results. As shown on this map by the dark areas, these dark patch blotches here, a large swathe from Geelong to Ballarat is included in the data available. So orders were placed for various portions within, including the Golden Lake area. This stuff has proved invaluable in this, but at the beginning of the process, a lack of full understanding had us missing a lot of the vital detail. Being of the belief that the most logical area from which to obtain timber was in the ranges to the northwest, this was where our investigations began. The topography directly to the west of the mine site tended to preclude a tramway heading in that direction. So the mine is actually off the bottom of the screen, and we've ignored the area directly to the west of that. And this image is an early example of the result of analysing the data. It was an attempt at identifying all the suspicious inconsistencies which have been traced over in pink that lead towards the mine site. And this little track heading sort of to the west, and these other ones heading up towards the north.
That's the
This red line here was the ballast siding, and the reason that there's two separate red lines showing on here is that it was initially traced with using Google Earth and then subsequently redrawn a bit more accurately with the LiDAR mapping. Now, subsequently, it was found that a program software feature to simulate the sun at a much lower altitude in the sky produced better outcomes. And playing around with the azimuth, or the sun's direction, also helped to highlight different detail. After discounting features that were too steep or too short, etc., the only likely options we were left with were the two lines of scarring heading north and away from the mine. One ran each side of a low hill, which is just this low hill in the bottom area down here, and they converged in a saddle where the current Skipton Railway Line rail trail crossed over. From there, they slowly separated as they traversed open ground, heading into the bush in different directions some 500 metres away. The assumption was made that one of these may have been the tramway and the other a water channel. The routes were plotted and we printed out and got ready for a site visit. On the day of the inspection, it was able to be confirmed that the more westerly scar was indeed a water channel and was traced from near to the mine northward to a point just beyond where it enters into bushland and nears Casey Road. The eastern scar ran at a slightly lower elevation, shallower upslope trenching, along with a seemingly wider mounding, gave it more of the appearance of a tramway formation. You can see here the hollow and the mounding to the right of it. It tended to show more of appear to be more of a formation. We're happy to entertain that notion as we traced its route towards the small acreage bush blocks to the north, and that is until we arrived at this sharp change of direction, which was much too sharp for the change to be a railway. This kink in it here, very, very sharp change. And therefore it was back to the drawing board. Not all on the day in this regard was in vain, though. What was assumed to be part of the southern leg of that eastern scar did turn out to be part of the tram line. Both of these water channels, as well as a third at a much lower elevation, were subsequently mapped and traced for their full lengths, but they are not in the scope of this presentation. Shortly afterwards, and purely by coincidence, as VR construction branch documentation was being thumbed through for the unrelated research, the name Joseph Nimmin jumped out. And that particular file, as it transpired, was in relation to the sizing of a culvert between the Smythes Creek Bridge and Golden Lake. Included was a report of the watershed of that gully and a mention of the two flimsy dams that it contained. This not only assisted greatly in the matter of the water channels, but it also led to the VR planar sections being sought out and referenced. And bingo, there it was, a portion of a tramway alignment. As you can see, the dotted line curling up here with old tramway annotated on the plan. Some of the features associated with the indicated alignment had been noticed in the earlier perusals of the LiDAR, but were discounted at the time as being inconsistent with the expected light construction and were seemingly unrelated to the mine, being too distant and, according to our only reference, was heading away in the wrong direction. This map, by the way, is south to the top. Despite an extensive search of all known likely archives to this date, this plan remains as one of only the two documented references to the existence of the tramway that have been located. Most fortunately, though, it gave us a definitive starting point for the subsequent investigation of all the extant evidence, which is all we had to go on. And this comprised another 2 long days of site inspection, supported by extensive LiDAR mapping and some use of Google Earth. As Michael mentioned, this line out of that 1926 history book is the only other known documented reference. Now, following 2 failed previous attempts, we finally managed to get a full day at Ballarat just last Monday gone, and we have now digitised all the pages of the surviving minute books of the Grenville Shire Council. The full era of the mine's operation is included, but the images of those 1,500 pages of those particular volumes will take some time to scour for any mention of the tramway. A quick scan of the indexes within them, though, has not come up with anything obvious as yet. So stay tuned. We might find something in these books down the track. Yeah, wonder what we've actually found. Now, for the purpose of this presentation, the route has been separated into 3 sections, and the first commences at the mine site down the bottom here and heads north for about 4 kilometres. to as far as the Glenelg Highway, which runs through along here, before curving away. From there, the second section, which is a little over 2 kilometres long, follows the alignment of the old Glenelg Highway. This cursor back here. The old Glenelg Highway used to come into Scarsdale up this way, so it follows along that route for a little while, before curving westwards and heading up into the Hederick Shepherd Gully, as it's named, to a point where the Gully Creek is crossed up in here. And the third section continues along that gully a short distance before bearing a little to the north along a tributary to an arbitrary point near a dam about some 1.5k further up in the hills here. Whereas most of the route on the first section can be confirmed to a very high degree of accuracy, both the second and third sections are still very much open to conjecture. If the tramway had continued beyond the first 4 kilometres though, it's almost certain that the route would have followed what has been mapped, to at least as far as the current pine plantation is reached, as no other possibilities have been able to be identified. And for the purpose of this map, you can see here the railway line coming down from Scarsdale up here, Newtown Station here, curving away towards Rokewood and Cressy on the right here, and the other one continuing around and over Nimmons Bridge here, and through off towards Happy Valley and Linton. Given the angle of approach to the Glenelg Highway, it appears very unlikely that the timber being sourced would have come from the areas to the east of there. Most of the land on the north side of the highway at that time was in private ownership, and this 1866 map of the Smythesdale-Linton Telegraph line is annotated that the best timber along that valley had been cut down. So that tends to preclude that area was the source of the timber at that time. Conversely, further to the north, the whole of the area towards the head of the Hederick Shepherd Gully was the property of the Crown and designated as a timber reserve. On contemporary mapping of the time, this one referencing it as comprising of 4,750 acres. Now, as you can see here, I've drawn a circle roughly 5 kilometres diameter around where it's annotated the timber reserve in the light green. And that circle contains a little over that 4,750 acres. So it's unlikely that the timber reserve extended much beyond that light green circle, if at all. And you can see the perimeter of it is in the vicinity of the Glenelg Highway, which comes down here. The route distances described are nominal, and they commence from the start of the plotted line, which is about 100 metres from the actual mine shaft, as no definitive starting point can be identified. Using the LiDAR, it's also been possible to plot a very accurate longitudinal sectional diagram, which shows the profile of the extant formation levels. The vertical exaggeration on this is 10 times. Allowing for a little erosion, etc. in the first section, the steepest grade was a short climb of no less than about 1 in 24 at about 2.2 kilometres. This was with the load. At 3 other locations, the grades are calculated to have been approximately 1 in 27, and 2 of these from about 1.5 to 1.7 kilometres along here, and 3.1 kilometres to 3.4 kilometres up along here were downhill with the load. The other from about 1.8 kilometres to 2.1 kilometres, this downhill section here, was against the load. In the second section, to as far as the load, okay, so the grades in the second section, the steepness of them, there's nothing in them that precludes them from being part of the line. This section up through here, the grades there's nothing to preclude them, because the steepest grades are actually in this first section, which has been confirmed. As the route ascends out of the gully up in here, the grade begins to steepen to closer to about 1 in 21 for about 200 metres, and that becomes the steepest in the whole area we've surveyed. And it makes it a little less likely that the line had continued through to here, although beyond this point up here, the average is closer to about 1 in 42. Now, the routes. From the mine, the identified route commences from a point somewhere out of shot off the right-hand side of the picture, down on this corner down here somewhere. It ran diagonally up to the left, and then curved up to the right onto this embankment here, which forms the dam. That was the water supply dam for the Golden Lake mine, and the embankment forms the dam bank as well. Beyond the dam proper, the bank rises to cross the Golden Lake Road in the centre of the picture, and at about its current level. The capacity of that water storage does not appear to have been a concern at the time of the tramway's construction, as the side ditches to provide the fill for the embankment were cut along both of its sides. There's actually dirt taken out from this side and that side to form the embankment, whereas normally you'd expect that if they were forming a dam to actually take it all from the dam side. As the line passed over the Golden Lake Road, it crossed over the water supply channel, which had come in through this paddock here and down into the dam over here, and the line curved to the right and followed along on the far side of the Galatea Road across to here. And a little over 100 metres further along, it indicated here by the blue arrow, it curved away to the left across the fence lines and into the open paddock over beyond in here. There's a map of the Golden Lake Township, and as you can see, the route superimposed over it in blue. Surprising, the map doesn't show anything dated 1871. Anyone's got any explanations why there's nothing showing, we'd like to hear from them. Now, continuing from the Galatea Road, which is this road at the very bottom of the screen, that was the road that ran into the Galatea mine further up here. And this paddock in this side has been continuously cultivated over the years and has obliterated almost all of the signs of that next section, as the line rose over a small rise and then dropped into a slight hollow behind the mine's water supply dam, which is up in here. But this is a good example of where the LiDAR imagery has proved invaluable. Nothing can be seen on the ground in there when you're walking through it, but it's possible to identify the extremely subtle ground inconsistencies which aren't visible. And it's just very, very shallow cutting coming through here, and the line continuing up along here. And for the next 200 metres or so from there, the line passed through a lightly treed section. And although not cultivated, the line's earthworks were quite minimal and very hard to discern. There are several old shallow mine workings in that area, and these, along with many years of cattle trampling, didn't do much to help with the investigations either. You can see all these little shafts and things cut into the ground there. At about the 790 metre mark, just before re-entering cultivated ground, the Galatea water supply channel is diagonally crossed. You can see the tramway coming up through here. Now, this created a lot of confusion on our first site visit to that spot, as the initial LiDAR imagery we were using covered a much larger area and was therefore significantly lower resolution. And it had been assumed that the evident scarring was all of the same feature, and hence only a single continuous line had been plotted joining one to the other. And we had thought on the day we came in from this direction along this water channel, not sure whether it was a channel or a tramway, and couldn't work out why it appeared to head off to the east here instead of heading back down this other line we'd plotted through here. Obviously that water channel has the appearance of being in use following the abandonment of the tramway because it's been cut across it. Now, where the railway line rail trail is crossed, there's nothing discernible. It's the railway running through the cutting down in here. The excavation of that cutting, along with all the side drainage channels, has obliterated all. And this view was taken from about the 1 kilometre point, looking back along the alignment and southeast across the cutting. The tramway was standing on the formation here, and the tramway continued in a straight line, more or less, through the narrow gap in between the trees in the distance here. As the line traversed this next paddock, some mounding was apparent underfoot in some of the lower areas, but not obvious enough for the camera. As a shallow gully was crossed at about 1.3 kilometres, a sharp curve to the right was taken by the route. At this point, a dam has been excavated across the alignment, although according to the 1880 VR track plan, a small waterhole did exist just upslope from it. Embankments on either side of the dam are still extant and are apparent in several of Google's satellite images, such as this one taken in 2016. You can just see a very subtle lining coming here from the south and curving back out on the north side. And that's standing on the edge of the dam and looking towards the northeast. And you can see the bank came through here. You can see a very slight mounding still there and curved around through to where Michael was standing there. And it passed through and across another deep little gully here and onto the hill over the other side. Now that point there was the lowest point on the whole line, and was from there that the first of the 1 in 27 grades commenced. Now, looking back from the other side, back to the southwest across the gully, near the 1.5 kilometre point, and the earthwork for that dam is just visible between the trees over here. The track has been recently pushed through the bank in the foreground, which conveniently shows its profile. You can see here where they've shoved some dirt through the bank, but you can still quite clearly see the actual formation of the bank there. The bed width on the top is about 3 to 4 feet wide, and which is very similar to other locations along the route. Whatever structure was provided for crossing the creek is long gone, but the current landowner is currently attempting to restore access across it at the same spot, with large plastic pipes being positioned and overlaid with brick rubble. Located very short distance upstream to the right are the remains of a dam, and this was one of the two along this water course described as flimsy in the 1889 VR report on the sizing of a culvert being provided during the construction of the Linton's line. And this particular dam supplied a second source of water for the Galatea mine, the channel of which ran at a much lower elevation than the other and crossed the alignment a short distance south of the gully. It's buried completely in the gorse bush there too. And that channel as well had been cut through the tramway embankment, so it was subsequent to the tramway's existence. Now, looking to the southwest from near 1.8 kilometre, getting close to the crest of the following hill. The crossing of the Skipton line is just out of shot in the left distance over here, where the tramway route passing from left to right across this paddock here. And you can just catch the dam in there, and it curved back around and through around to through this into this cutting through the hill to the right. That was the 1 in 27 grade coming up there. And that cutting continues over the crest for about 218 metres, and its current depth is still a metre below natural ground level. In the same position looking to the north, you can see the spoil was mounded to the sides. And this is a profile using the LiDAR again, showing the profile, the extant profile of that cutting roughly in the foreground here. And it's worthy of note, as unlike usual railway construction, there was no moving of the earth from the cuttings down to the embankments. All the spoil and fill was only shovelled sideways, which would have necessitated a lot more labour. You know, look, where the line crosses the next gully at 2.12 kilometres, the slope of the track bed drops away as the bottom is neared. And this scenario was the same in the previous gully at 1.42 kilometres, and does not appear to be due to erosion, as the borrow pits also tend to shallow out. Notice here how it curves a little bit steeper at the bottom edge, with shallower side cuttings as well. It's difficult to understand the logic of that, but we can only presume that some form of timber pigsty arrangement was used across this watercourse. And this being laying the timbers on the ground in a crisscross fashion, with the lower bank there to assist with drainage only around that structure. Now, looking back to the south across that same gully, this angle shows better changes of the slope of the embankments. Across the next two properties to the north, the route has been very much disturbed by the development in the vicinity of the houses on both of them. The only visible scarring curves away a little to the east towards a shallow cutting crossing a low east-west ridge. So this is the coming up from that last little gully, the gully itself just off the bottom of shot, and it approaches these properties. Both these properties through here have been very, very much developed. So trying to trace the route going north, it was assumed that it can't come through. The only cutting we could see was this little low cutting crossing this east-west ridge just in here, and there is some scarring up through here, although some of those are current tracks of that as well. This here is in a treed paddock with no recent signs of any disturbance or anything. So that became the assumed alignment, and a great deal of time was spent in the next property to the north of Murphy's Lane just here, attempting to verify that with any extant evidence. And the property on the north side there has been very much disturbed as well over the years, particularly near its southern boundary. However, with the initial LiDAR mapping, there was a vague evidence of a couple of possible different routes continuing north from that shallow cutting. Get my mouse and cursor there. Now these two lines of scarring, the yellow and the orange, which is shown on a Google map here, they converged again up to the north before passing through another cutting at about 3.3 kilometres on the next property along. And the assumption was made that the tramway had followed along the route shown by the yellow line, and the scant amount of evidence identified with this particular site was inspected tended to concur with it. The second option, shown in orange, was slightly longer, and the path profile showed it to be more undulating, so it was presumed to have been a roadway of sorts. It was considered possible that the easterly slew of this area was to avoid other mining activity towards the west side of this property. There are mines marked on maps of the time, and you can see a little bit of scarring here and there amongst that area there. And during consolidation of this report, access to a much more detailed and manipulative LiDAR mapping became available, being this image we're looking at here now. And fine tweaking of the parameters revealed more detail of another very subtle anomaly running north-south through here. Although it's somewhat narrower in appearance than the other identified remnants, that had been discounted as being just some striation, which occasionally occurs during the processing of the data. It's obviously come up a little bit more clearer in this subsequent mapping we were able to do. Although it's only seen to the north of Murphy's Lane. Whoops, we've gone one forward. I've clicked on it instead of moving. It is beyond coincident that that alignment does actually connect in a straight line to the more visible parts of the formation down in the bottom area down here. But as you can see, with this dam and things in here, there's absolutely no evidence of anything in that area, either visibly or with the LiDAR. And unfortunately, subsequent access onto that property has so far been denied to us. So another site inspection to enable a more definitive confirmation in that area has not been possible as yet. And that's the profiles of those blue and yellow lines. And you can see it would have crossed the low ridge to the south of Murphy's Road at a much higher elevation, but no evidence of that here exists. On the ground, it also appeared unlikely, but a comparison of the profiles of the two options shows that the route was actually much more favourable in that gully. Yellow here dips down quite deeply into that gully in the middle. Now, moving along to about the 3.25 kilometre mark as the line neared the top of the main dividing range, it had entered another considerable cutting, of which a length of about 75 metres still remains. And this cutting appears to have again been about 1 metre deep. However, backfilling at the crest, as well as down the northern flank for later access roads, makes it hard for a more accurate estimation to be made. The dumping of a large amount of rubbish in the extant top end also does nothing to assist. And from the crest of that ridge, looking to the north, the alignment passes just to the right of that agapanthus here. And the cutting would have extended to at least down to that distance originally. From the north end of that same property, looking back to the south, a dam has recently been constructed in the hollow adjacent to the bend in Basin Road. And you can just pick it out, some fencing and things around it, but the dam's been dug down in here. And that picture was taken standing on a substantial embankment that still remains, extending from that dam for about 85 metres further to the north. Very hard to see or discern with the amount of undergrowth and things growing over it there. And that's the same embankment a little further on where the trees were sparse enough to enable it to be photographed. Now, from that previous embankment, the tramway was surface formed on gently sloping grounds through to the Glenelg Highway. At this location, an excellent opportunity exists to demonstrate the huge advantage of having the ability to manipulate the LiDAR modelling. In the left image, the sun has been positioned almost on the horizon, away to the northeast. And this has the effect of highlighting the very subtle earthwork of the formation that was undertaken. It is this sort of detail that is mostly undetectable underfoot. And that's this, you can just see this formation coming through here. And since the collection of the raw data for this, which was taken a few years ago, most of this artefact through here has now been lost. There's been a construction of a new house has been carried out in the period, and it sits over this area here now. On the right-hand photo, with the sun repositioned around to the north, as in the right-hand, that formation tends to disappear out of sight altogether. However, evidence then appears of a very shallow cutting curving around to bring the tram line parallel to the highway, as you can see here, which is quite obvious in this photograph, but not in this one. That's the highway there running across the top there. The subsequent work, there's a big side ditch being dug along the side of the highway there as well, which has pretty much obliterated anything along this next section. Now, as I earlier mentioned, from this point on, it's all conjecture. And neither the LiDAR nor site inspection has been able to positively confirm that any extent features are tramway related. Where the old Glen Elk Highway swings away to the north, the road reserve forms a large triangle. So this is the current Glen Elk Highway through here, and the original alignment came down through here and across a little culvert down here and up this way. The current road that's through there has been realigned and runs on here. If the tramway did pass through here, the westerly road alignment would have been constructed on its formation, this one down here. It is evident that extensive mining took place on the west side as well in this area, and mullock has been pushed aside when forming this new road. From where the roadways merge at the top of the picture, the tramway would have had to have hugged the edge of the roadway for about 300 metres to the north. Low undisturbed cuttings exist on both sides and that stretch, precluding any greater separation. It's just off the top of the image there. And along that stretch, the alignment climbs at around about 1 in 27, which would be the steepest grade in that second section. Now, when the property situated at the intersection of the Old Glen Elk Highway, which is this road running through here, and McMaster's Road, so this property in here, the suspected route tends to curve away to the west through it. Although the block's been extensively altered and is crisscrossed with all sorts of trails and bike tracks, there is a line of very vague scarring that provides the only likely alignment, which is pointed out all the way through here. On the other side of that road, after the road passes out of the back of that property, it crosses over McMaster Road and continues to curve broadly as it skirts around the north side of a pine plantation. At about 5.4 kilometres, still following the same fence line, it enters into a wooded area which it traverses for about 400 metres. So it would run along this side of the fence and curve gently around towards the left as it ended up into those trees up in there. And along that portion, at about 5.7 kilometres, a small pipe culvert was found, and it passes under that formation. Very much buried and silted up, very, very subtle. only a small opening between a couple of rocks that drew our attention to it. But it confirms that the intention for that alignment to have had some sort of permanence, whether it was for a tramway or for the subsequent roadway that may have been laid along there. And after carefully removing some of the small rocks that were retaining the soil at the ends, the pipes were found to be terracotta. It was considered that these were too modern to have been used for a tramway of that era, but although it could be possible that this was a replacement for a decayed timber structure, and references cite that glazed clay piping was being manufactured in Australia at least as early as the 1860s. Now, being the only known tangible evidence along that whole portion, we revisited the site and made some further investigations. And the upslope, the south side, was cleared out and exposed the flared end of the 6-inch diameter terracotta pipe, as we already noted. However, on the north side, considerably more digging was required as the outlet had become completely buried. And hopes of finding a little more conclusive, though, were dashed when it was found that what was thought to be wood from a tree root turned out to be the pipe. It was made from a fibrous woody material of similar consistency to MDF, but clearly much more rot resistant. And the total length of the piping is about 9 feet from end to end, and longer than would have been necessary for under a tramway. So it is assumed that one of those ends was added at some later date. To ascertain which was the original, a hole was then dug about midway, which was no easy feat, considering it was a heavily compacted roadbed of deep lead quartz tailings and soil. But as seen, it is a fibrous pipe, so the terracotta on the south side is likely the later extension. As yet, no information can be found on this form of piping, but a wood fibre pipe named Orangeburg has been manufactured in the US since the 1860s. Orangeburg pipe, though, as is seen in this picture taken from Wikipedia, was heavily impregnated with a liquefied coal tar pitch, which coloured it black. The extant piping contains no traces of anything black, but it does seem to be of a similar structure. And that's looking back to the east along that route after we backfilled the that hole, which was in about here. So we've got the terracotta pipe coming in from this side of the embankment and the wood fibre pipe exiting out this side. So we've got the likely route marked there. You can see through all the rest of the property land through here is currently sown with pine plantation, and it's probably about 3 generations down the track as well. So a lot of changes to the landscapes occurred, but you can still make out very vague little subtle routes of old tracks and things like that. Now we suspect after it enters this plantation proper, that it continued down along what is Martin's Road along here. That at about 6 kilometres, it levels off for about 130 metres and then crosses over that gully's main watercourse. Analysing the final section has been made much more troublesome by that 100 or so years of pine tree cultivation. During that time, there have been multiple harvestings, as I mentioned. For the bulk of the route, the alignments of Martins and Eva roads provide the most likely path, providing the most even gradients. Commencing from the creek crossing, which is down to the right down here, Martins Road begins to ascend, reaching around about 1 in 21 prior to the intersection of Stable Road. And between there and Eva Road, the slope increases to about 1 in 19 through here. That subtle scarring, though, that runs back up on this alignment here, it does provide a more direct route and is more consistent with that 1 in 21 grade that is in this lower section down here. The more northerly scar from the ground has more of the appearance of an eroded gully, but it would have provided a very slightly easier grade again to get up to this point up here due to its increased distance. Along the remainder of this section, along Eva Road, although a little undulating, average grades of about 1 in 42 are maintained. With the continuing alignment of Martins Road not appearing to be practical for use as a tramway, another scar to the south, which heads uphill to the west on the opposite side of the main gully, seemed the only other possible option, which is this one down in here we were able to discern. And that was all we were able to identify using that LiDAR mapping, although most certainly it was a vehicular track from side inspection, given its very undulating nature, and appears to have just provided a link between two other north-south tracks. This track through the bush here and this other one over here. And being benched into the hillside, it's very discernible on the ground, despite the extensive ripping carried out from the most recent of the pine plantings. And therefore it may have been used very shortly before that. Now, that's about all we're able to tell you at this stage. We've probably got more questions now than when we first started. I'm hoping that more references will surface, and we've still got some archives to trawl through, as I mentioned, and hopefully we can answer some of them. And that's about what we have. Thank you very much.
Well, Geoff, thank you very much. Yeah, very interesting. It's been a lot of groundwork you've had to do out there.
Yes, quite a lot.
Yeah.
We've had 4 trips up into the on the ground there so far, plus the trips to the Ballarat Prov.
Yeah. No, you and your sidekick there seem to have done quite a lot of kilometres walking across this area.
We're becoming well known at the Scarsdale Hotel. They do good palmers.
Yeah, we aim for Wednesdays when they have palmer night.
Oh, fair enough. That's good. Yeah, no, that was quite interesting. It's amazing what can be deduced from what seems to be nothing at times.
Yes. Yeah, some of it is so obvious. You can see in this image here, that's looking from the Golden Lake Road back towards the mine, and it just looks like a dam bank. You would not pick that as a tramway line, but not until you look at it closer, and you can see from about here it actually starts to increase in slope up towards the road a bit.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah, I've got one question. Have you got a GPX file of that tram line that you drew on Google Earth?
Yeah, I can make the routes public. What do you call it? What's the Google file?
I can't remember.
GPX is it records the latitude, longitude, and sometimes altitude. That was those lines that you had just of the tram line.
Yeah, not GPX. I do have the routes, and we've also got them done with in the LiDAR. You can interchange. You can bring them in and out of LiDAR. You can draw them in LiDAR and then bring them into Google as well.
You could produce, is it KML files?
KML, that's the one. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that'll do. You could
I
import that
can
into.
convert that easily.
Yeah.
If you put it up somewhere.
You need to bear in mind that almost the entire line is in private property. Certainly from the mine up to the Glenelg Highway is all on private land. Some owners have been very friendly and cooperative. One is the opposite. And the area where the mine is here that you can see in the photograph appears to be still Crown land, but it's leased by one of the landowners whose family been there since the 1860s.
Could I just interrupt just for a moment, Geoff? Could you wouldn't mind just stop the sharing? We can get more faces up now. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah. I just don't know whether I might have needed the map again.
Oh, well, you can go back again if you need to.
We can. We need it. Yeah.
Right.
Questions?
Could I just add or suggest, Geoff? I did mention the other day the geoscience era photography. But where you went to wasn't the right spot. But I just had a quick flick through just now. There's a whole heap of 1934 era photography right through that area, which is brilliant stuff. So that might be worth having a look at because it
the
geoscience.
Yeah, the geoscience. I did go onto that and had a look.
Yeah, but that's what you showed. What you sent to me wasn't what I was talking about.
Yeah, that was another one. That was another lot.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I did. Since you told me, I did find the geoscience ones.
Yep.
And there's a lot of them all overlapping, heading north and south.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Sadly, I couldn't see anything. You could see some of those cuttings, but there was nothing that was able to provide any more clues.
Fair enough. Yep.
Other questions?
Yeah, Bob here. What was the motive power on that line?
Motive power. We have no clues. We haven't been able to get any documented details to ascertain why, how, who. As yet, the only two references, as we said, were from the one line reference and the thing on the map. We can't find anything that gives any indication of the tramway, whether it was timber rail, iron rail, motive power. Just surprisingly undocumented.
And it's further puzzling. The company regularly advertises tenders for supply of firewood and mine timbers, and full particulars available from the mine office. Well, that doesn't help us much. But that sort of implies that, well, are you calling tenders and saying to deliver it via our tramway? That seems to be the only logical thing, because otherwise the contractors are just going to turn up with their wagons and carts and timber in and lose the contract in 12 months' time. They're not going to build a tramway. So it's all puzzling. It's all more questions than answers.
Peter Evans here. There was a contractor who was also a director of the mine, was the firewood contractor, and he ended up at Apollo Bay with, I think, 3 foot 6-inch gauge tramways, horse-hauled, wooden railed.
And what era was that?
That was during the era of the mine.
Okay.
It's in the history I wrote, which I think I sent you a copy.
Yeah,
I'm just struggling to hear. Your volume is very low, Peter. I couldn't quite hear you. I think Michael did.
No, it was hard.
Let's let it out.
Yeah, Geoff, I was going to say, if you've got the chat there, I'll just put my email address. If you could email that file later on, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm assuming other people may want it. We find some way of lodging it somewhere publicly where it can be accessed.
It can be. We can do that, but it can also, if it's in the chat too, it'll be in part of the recording of the meeting. So one way or another, we'll get it.
Okay.
Peter Evans here again. This might work a little better. I've got my headset on. There was a director of the mine who was also a firewood contractor supplying that and an adjacent mine. and he ended up a sawmiller at Apollo Bay, and I think had 3-foot 6-inch gauge horse-hauled tramways running on wooden rails. So there's a hint at what may have happened at Golden Lake.
Okay, that was at Apollo Bay. You had that tramway.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
I'm sure something will come out of the woodwork eventually, but we can't find it yet.
I did a very careful search of all of the local papers, and I came up with very little apart from that.
Yeah, that's about where we're at, and our assumption is that somebody must have applied for permission to put a tramway across roadways, particularly the Glenelg Highway, although it obviously wasn't the Glenelg Highway at the time, and that's why we've gone for the Grenville Shire minute books, and we're hoping that something will turn up there where someone's applying for permission. Then at least we'll know who applied, and that might pinpoint a date, because from 1863 from 1863 for several years they were sinking the shaft and pumping water, and probably not needing a huge amount of firewood and timber mine props. But then they start to get into production, and there's references to buying an additional boiler, and that sort of gives a hint about when perhaps their timber demands may have increased. That's more sort of the mid to late 1860s, and as we said, it looks like they were winding down from 1874 and selling up by 1875.
Yeah, that's correct. But there would have been they were in very wet ground, so there would have been a whole forest underground of mining timbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob again. Any thought of the gauge at all? No, information on that at all?
All we have is what Peter's just told us then, the 3-foot 6 at Apollo Bay. A fellow related to the mine, which is a possibility.
You certainly get the feel from the earthworks that it couldn't have been much bigger than 3-foot 6. It maybe was 3 foot, and you'd tend to think 2-foot gauge would be too small, but so that's just it's just our gut feel looking at the embankments and the cuttings. You'd tend to think they're about a size that could take a 3-foot or 3-foot 6 gauge tram line.
Yeah. Well, so where to from now?
I've got to find the hours to go through those 1,500 pages of council minutes.
Yeah.
I started a couple of days ago with them. I got through a little bit, but I thought, getting too close to tonight, I don't want to have to rewrite everything now. I thought I'll shelve that until afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, so we might see you in was it 2026 then?
You might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've explored all of the newspaper reports and the Government Gazette. Pretty much every 6 months they had their assets and liability statements in the Government Gazette. Yeah, we're just hoping that these Grenville Shire records might give some hint to the tramway, and I've still got to look through some more mines reports on the off chance that someone might have written an extensive report on the mine and mentioned the tramway, but they didn't tend to. They tended to be fascinated by what was below the ground and don't mention much other than the winding gear and the boilers and the plant at the surface.
Yeah, I've done the reports of the mining surveyors and registrars for that whole period of the mine, and there was nothing there.
Okay, thanks.
We've copied a lot of those too, but haven't studied them yet. So maybe we don't need to.
I was fortunate to have original copies.
The other surprising thing is Michael's found most of the reports of the shareholders' meetings And there's been no mention in any of those expenditure for the tramway like that. Must have been raised at some point, discussed and approved, and but as yet, no reference.
I would tend to think the tramway was actually financed by the timber supplier rather than the mine.
Yeah, so it might have just been a financial nicety that they advertised tenders each year, but they already knew who was going to get the contract.
Well,
Because someone certainly put a lot of time and effort into that earthworks.
Any other comments or questions? No.
Peter, if you've got the name of that that bloke who shifted to Apollo Bay, I know a couple of the meeting reports we've got have got a list of the shareholders.
Well, I sent a copy of that history to Geoff. He should have it there, and it was in that.
Right, I'll be interested to see if he turns up as a shareholder.
Well, he was actually a director of the mine.
Okay. Yeah, we know the mine manager was a Glaud, Glaud Pender. So it's an unusual Christian name, but he was the mine manager for the duration of the Golden Lake Company. And there was another person with the same surname as one of the shareholders, so presumably either his father or a son or a brother.
I actually have a photo of him to go with the field report, which will eventually appear in Light Railways.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Looks like it's all the dust is settled. Geoff and Michael, thank you very, very much for that interesting presentation. I can see that there's been many hours has been put into it, and there's many hours to go to find the full story. But on behalf of the council and all the other members, thank you very much for your presentation tonight.
Well, thank you for allowing us.
It's all right. All right. Mike, have you got anything else?
No, just add to that. I loved all the research and the very familiar sort of activity to me, to be honest. But it's great stuff. I really enjoyed it. Good analysis. One thing I can be absolutely sure of, you two have had an absolute ball with this, and I can really relate to, and even the Palmer at the local pub. There's a few of us heading up doing.
It's certainly been very enjoyable, but you sort of feel at the end of the day, hey, we really haven't gained anything about to further the information other than spending a nice day wandering around the bush getting sunburned.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what. Sometimes when you do stuff like you not finding stuff is actually finding stuff, because it's actually saying, well, it wasn't there, so you're ruling something out. But it's a lot of fun, and there's a few of us doing something very similar up at Erica in a few weeks' time, and so I can understand the work you've gone through, and the sources you've gone to. It's all really familiar territory for me, I tell you, and but above all, just how much fun you've had with it, which is great to see. I could just sense it from you two. It's great.
Yeah, if there was a Water Channel Research Society of Australia, we could probably do a more definitive presentation, because the water channels themselves were fascinating, and we've followed them right to the source, so we know where the dams are, and the dam walls are quite substantial, and the channels we can trace pretty well all the way down to the reservoirs at the mine. And we got distracted the other day at Newtown and went looking at the railway dam, and that was amazing what we found there. The railway reservoir,
it's
massive
great
wall, and a concrete spillway, and a bit of cast iron pipe work. And it's all still sitting there up in the bush. Probably hardly anybody visits it.
Yeah, great. Nothing else from me, Bill.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Well, once
Well,
again,
actually, before we go, I just got another question unrelated to this one. Just during my research, I found a little bit about the tramway clunes across the railway line, and a few of us have got into a little bit of a discussion about that. It's believed that Light Rail had done a report on that, or an article on that at some stage. Is that known to anybody? Tramway clunes that took the stuff from the mine down to the battery down at the river.
I have some stuff in the field reports folder, some of which I think came from Colin Harvey.
Yeah. Yeah, for some reason or other, I know something about that. Or know aware of it because I was working up in that area some years ago.
Oh,
yeah.
Was it published at all, or?
I don't believe so. It's in my to-do list.
Yeah, Chris Were had an idea it had been published. He'd read about it somewhere, he thought, but he couldn't find anything.
I thought it might have been something Scott Gould did.
I'll have to give him a call.
Yeah, my only previous knowledge of it was Richard Gilbert pointing the earthworks out to me quite a few years ago, running across from the mine across towards the railway when he was on one of my tours and we're driving past on the coach, and he just sort of pointed it out to all the passengers.
I should send you gentlemen what I have, and you can apply your boots to the ground.
Much appreciated. Another diversion.
Well, I've got 2 new knees now, so I'll be back into the fray shortly.
You haven't worn them in just yet, though.
Oh, I did 5 kilometres on them yesterday.
All right.
Yeah. That's good.
Just slightly off topic, but Peter will be interested, and I'll drop a note to add to the field report that he put in the Light Railways about a year ago when the ballast tram line was discovered in the middle of the car park at South Geelong Station.
Yeah.
A few of us made some representations to the syndicate duplicating the Warrnambool Railway that a section of that should be saved, and it appeared they'd buried it all. But I found out recently they'd actually dug some of the rail up, and they offered it to me to find a good home for it. And I said, well, it should be displayed at South Geelong Station because that's where it was based. But no, there was no way they were going to have a bit of old rail at their modern, inefficient railway station. And I said, well, the next relevant place is probably Queenscliff, seeing the tram line was there in order to build the railway to Queenscliff. And then there was a bit of a circus where, well, you can't come and pick it up because we'll have to deliver it. But I could never get them to tell me when and where and how it could be delivered. And then 2 weeks ago, one of the girls from their PR thing rang me up and said, you haven't come and picked up this rail yet. And I said, well, you told me I couldn't pick it up. So I went down there and identified what they had because she didn't know how long it was and she thought it was very heavy, which to me didn't sound like the tram line. But they had half a dozen lengths of the rail, which they'd cut into about 5 metre lengths in a shipping container, and they were vacating the site the following day. So I managed to hire a tandem trailer and secure the half a dozen lengths. So they're heading away at the moment. But I guess a few of us might have to debate where it may be relevant to keep some parts of it, because there's probably no particular place that needs 6 5 metre lengths of the rail. I haven't even had time to measure it yet, but it's pretty small, probably about 1.5 inches high and certainly no more than 2 inches high, and it's got a lot of stone encrusted onto the sides of it. And at least one piece has got a fish plate in the middle of it, so that gives us a bit of an idea of the style of the fish plate. So I'll probably clean a bit of it up and take some photos and measurements and send something in for an update in Light Railways.
Field reports would be very happy to receive it.
Yeah.
I just did a brief search, quick search through Light Railways magazines for anything relating to clunes, and there are only about 3 or 4, but nothing that seemed to relate to what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it was published, but I got some stuff from Scott and sent him a diagram. I have walked over it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, collectively we might be able to put 2 and 2 together and get something that makes some sort of sense.
Michael, while I think of it, had any more thoughts about the beech forest crossover?
Not particularly.
Oh, okay.
Well, it'd be probably nice if it was put back somewhere near where it came from.
Yeah, exactly.
There are a few. There's actually a small little group, sort of Beech Forest Historical Society. They're quite a good little group, and they've got quite a good display in the hall at Beech Forest. So maybe it could be put into their custody, and perhaps it might have to be displayed adjacent to their collection at the hall, and it can be kind of pointed out where it was across the road, more or less.
Yeah.
It'd be good. It'd be good to see it. Yeah, somewhere where it's not going to get lost in the longer term.
Yeah, true. All right, if that's it, thank you very much, everyone, for coming along, and especially your presenters tonight, Geoff and Michael. Thank you. It's been a very interesting night. On that note, thank you everyone else for tuning in. It's been good to see your faces, and we look forward to seeing you next month. It's only a month away.
And I've just checked the link for next month, and there's nothing wrong with it. So
oh, very good.
Apology for tonight. I still don't know what happened. It's weird, but we'll find out. But next month is safe.
Yeah. Okay. Until then, all the best, everyone.
Yeah.
See ya.
Okay.
So
Bye. Thanks, guys.